Hi, Tam here. It's extremely unlikely that within your first contract on a cruise ship, you are gonna go in as a senior physician and head of department. You need to have previous cruise ship experience to be considered for such a position. To go on your very first cruise ship and be the senior doctor and be in charge of the medical department, in charge of the nursing staff, the paramedics, if there are paramedics on board, and doctor number 2 is extremely unlikely. If you're on a one doctor ship, because some ships have one doctor, for you to go in there on your very first contract and be put alone on a cruise ship, again, is extremely unlikely. Because if you're alone as the only doctor on board, then by default you are the head of department. Now, I'm saying that because a colleague of mine here in the ER, so he's an emergency physician, and he told me that, hey, I have applied for a job on a cruise ship and they offered me a position as the senior doctor on board. In fact, this doctor told me that he's never worked on a cruise ship before. He's never even been on a cruise ship as a passenger. And I told the guy, listen, I would think twice before taking a job with a cruise line that is willing to put you on the spot like that. They know very well that you're not gonna be able to cope very well as a senior doctor. And if you take that position, if you take the job, you risk embarrassing yourself. In fact, you will embarrass yourself. Nothing to do with your medical skills, your clinical knowledge, no. And when I told him that, he said, hey, but you know what, actually I've watched one of your videos and you said that on your first contract, your very first contract, you were alone on a ship with more than 4,000 people. You were the senior physician and you were the only doctor. So surely if you could do that, I'd be able to do it, right? And I told him no. And to all of you doctors who think that you could actually venture on a cruise ship for the very first time of your life, never ever having worked on a cruise ship before, and show up there as the senior doctor, head of department, I'm here to tell you that it is a mistake. Now, let me talk to you about my situation and give you a bit of context about my situation. Yes, on my very first cruise ship in 2011, my first cruise line was Carnival Cruise Line. And yes, on my very first day on board, my very first contract, I joined as a senior physician, and I was on a single doctor ship. The ship was a Carnival Pride, and the ship's home port was Baltimore in Maryland. But let me give you some context. I had never been on a cruise ship before. I was perhaps overconfident. I was oozing with confidence. You would have given me a job to go on a mission to Mars or a mission to the moon and be the only doctor on board with no experience as an astronaut or engineering, and I would have said, yes, I'm ready to go. That was just my state of mind. But besides that, yes, I took the job, but the context is this. My interview was face-to-face. So it was not like today where all interviews, especially post the COVID era, are basically Zoom, Skype not anymore, but are basically online interviews, right? Google, Zoom, or any other online platform, right? Back then, in 2011, when I did my interview, in fact, I did my interview in 2010, December 2010, and I went on board in April 2011. So that's the first thing. So there were 4 months, 3 months and a half, between my interview and me going on board. My interview, as I said, was face-to-face. I met the medical director of Carnival Cruise Line back in 2010. I was in his office, we shook hands, I sat down, and we had a long interview. Usual clinical questions, clinical scenarios, emergency medicine scenarios, adapted to cruise ship situations. What would you do if this happens or that happens? And there are plenty of different scenarios. You need to do medevac, but it's impossible. You put your patient in a ventilator. He has to stay in ICU conditions in your ICU for 3 days before being evacuated. What are your ventilatory settings, your ICU management, and all that stuff. So it was very, very long and extensive. And after the medical, the clinical part, right away, he told me, you got the job. Right away in the office, he told me, you got the job, I want you on board as one of my doctors. So anyway, so I got the job, and initially I didn't know where I was gonna go, but then later on, talking about 2011, around January I think, or February, I was now told that I was gonna go on a one doctorship as the senior doctor. In fact, I told him already on that day, that interview day, that I would like to be the senior doctor. Because he had told me, you see, there's a senior doctor and there's a junior doctor, and you're gonna start as a junior and then later on, and I said, no. I don't want any of that junior doctor stuff. I wanna be the senior doctor, right? So anyway, so he gave me that senior doctor post, and he put me on a one doctorship, and the ship was going to be the Carnival Pride, home port, Baltimore. He gave me a ton of information for me to survive and to prepare myself. Tips, advices, answering all my questions, and he was very supportive because he wanted me to succeed, and he wanted the cruise line to look good, and was very confident that you're gonna do well, On top of that, like I said, my interview was in December. I joined my first cruise ship in April. So 24th of December, the day before Christmas, was my interview. First week of April, I was on board for the first time. So I did a full 3 months of preparation. But on top of that, in the same city where I lived and worked, was the doctor who was doing the technical support for Carnival Cruise Line. Technical support, logistics, making sure the EMR system works. In fact, the EMR at Carnival Cruise Line in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, that system had been created by that doctor that was living in the same city where I was living. This doctor, an excellent doctor, a wonderful human being as well, a gentleman. Thanks to this doctor, I learned a lot about the details, the tricks, the traps, things to do, things to avoid when working as a cruise ship doctor, as the senior doctor. So the medical director basically told me, listen, so our doctor, our support doctor lives in the same city where you live. I'm gonna give him your phone number, he's gonna give you a call. You guys can meet over lunch and you can ask all the questions you have. He did that. That doctor contacted me. We met in a restaurant over breakfast or lunch or brunch, I don't remember. And I prepared hundreds of questions, because I was preparing myself. I was still working in the ER, but I was now fully committed to working on a cruise ship as the head of department. So I was doing my homework every night. I was doing my homework about Carnival Cruise Line. I was studying the company, going on the company website, studying all the ships, the entire fleet. When I found out I was going to go on the Carnival Pride, I was now focused on the Carnival Pride. I was studying Carnival and the Carnival Pride in particular as if I was a soldier going on a military up on board, I studied everything about that ship. When was the ship built? Where was it built? Where is Carnival building its ships? Fincantieri. What's Fincantieri? Details upon details. And then what am I expected to do? What should I do when I have that situation and this situation? And although during my interview and my interaction with the medical director, he had answered all my questions, but I had so many more questions now. And so when I met the good doctor that was living in my home city, when we met, I bombarded him with questions upon questions, and he was so kind. He was answering all my questions, and he gave me tips, because you don't know what you don't know. So there were so many important questions that I was not asking because I had never been on board. And so he was volunteering so much more information about things I had not even thought about because I didn't know what I didn't know. So you can imagine how deep of an orientation I got. Like I said, that doctor was the creator of the EMR, the electronic medical record for Carnival Cruise Line. He created it himself. So he created it, he was maintaining it, and all the doctors and nurses at Carnival Cruise Lines were using it. And when there was a glitch, there was a problem, they would email him and he would reply to them wherever they were in the world. And so he explained into details the system that he created. Lots and lots and lots of tips from the creator himself, face to face over lunch. So, like I said, my introduction, my orientation was deep, and I was taking notes. And I was taking notes, and I was studying all that stuff. And so you can imagine when I got on my first cruise ship, 3 months after my interview, I was really ready to go and assume my role as the senior doctor and head of department. And yet, when I arrived, there were so many things that I didn't know. So many things. And so for me, it was a baptism of fire. With all the training, with all the orientations, with all the advices, still, it was hard. The one thing I didn't have access to were what we call the SMSs, the procedural book of the ship, of the cruise line. There are SMSs guiding everything. If this happens, you must do this. If this happens, you must do that. More like when you're on the spaceship, really, where you've got this emergency book, or this standard procedural book, where for every little thing that might go wrong, you have to do this. And to prevent that anything goes wrong, you must do like this massive checklist. And that checklist is massive. It will take you weeks to go through all those points in there. So I had to go through it when I was on board, because it's only accessible when you're on board. And then you have your inspections, the CDC inspections, the USPH inspections, the HES audits. Nothing can really prepare you for that, short of having gone through it first one day and now you're going through it again for the second time, and you already know what to expect. The inspectors know you because they might have seen you before. So it's all a little bit more chilled, but still, quite intense. You must know the VSP manual. I remember the first time the lead nurse told me, what is the VSP manual saying about this particular procedure? And I was like, the VSP what? What's VSP? And she looked at me. I will never forget that look. She was she was shocked. Like, she said, excuse me? The vessel sanitation program. I said, oh, of course, yes, no, yeah, I was thinking about something else. No, I wasn't. I didn't know. So you have to familiarize yourself with the VSP manual, with all the procedures and protocols relating to the medical operations of the cruise ships in the VSP manual. You might arrive on a cruise ship, and on the very first week when you arrive, or maybe the second week, you're alone and you get a USPH inspection, United States Public Health Inspection, if the ship is in the United States. And if you've never been on a cruise ship before, you will struggle to answer some of the questions. And if you answer them wrong, the ship might lose some points. The ship is only allowed to lose a certain number of points. One of the most important things for any cruise line is to score very high on USPH inspections. When a ship gets 100 out of 100, it's a celebration. When a ship gets 97 out of 100, it's good. When a ship gets 90 out of 100, it's poor. It's a pass, but it's poor. If your ship gets 65, the ship is not going to be allowed to sail. The CDC will ground that ship at the port pending another inspection. And if many of these points have been lost because of the medical center, the medical operations on board, because the temperatures are not right, because the storage of the medication is improper, because the storage of equipment is touching the ceiling where it's supposed to be 30 centimeters clear of the ceiling, if the AG logs are completely messed up, if the AG sampling tools are missing, and you keep losing points after points after points, and at the end you find that the medical center has lost 10 points out of the 100 for the entire cruise ship, you're gonna get fired. There's no other way. You will get fired. And so yeah, if you get a job as a senior doctor on a cruise ship, on your very first contract, be very careful. It's a lot of work. Cheers.